Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got another story here sent by almost everybody. Thank you very much. The Institute for Justice is involved because it's a good fight. The question is it free speech or a public nuisance? Nazareth resident fights for sale sign law in court. There's a law regarding for sale signs if you put them in a car on a public street. So the resident of Nazareth put a for sale sign on his 1987 Chevy Deluxe, and he got a ticket for violating a borough law against parking vehicles for sale in the street. There's now a lawsuit involved in this. LehighValleyLive.com runs the story with Rudy Miller writing it. The man was leaving the country and decided to sell his truck and his car before he left. So he posted the truck for sale on social media, but he couldn't find any takers, so he put a for sale sign on the car that he parks in front of his home in the first block of East High Street. He then found a parking ticket on the truck in October. Now, the truck was parked legally, but he was ticketed for violating an ordinance against parking vehicles that display for sale signs on a public street. So there's a sign that says for sale on it. That's bad. Bumper stickers that say almost anything, that's okay. Now, technically, I think a bumper sticker that said for sale wouldn't be working, but another story altogether. The law prohibits parking a car on the street for the purpose of selling the car. It also prohibits working on the car while it's parked in the street, and they define it as greasing a car. So again, for those of you who like those obscure legal terms such as, pick lock, you also can't grease your car on the street. Now, the man does not have a driveway, so that's part of the problem. There's nowhere else for him to park his truck. So the sign is incidental to his using the truck as a means to get around the area. So he's got a lawsuit he's filed in federal court claiming his rights to free speech were violated. People have put for sale signs in car windows for as long as cars have been around, and there's no legitimate reason for the government to ban doing so, says Bobby Taylor, one of the attorneys with the nonprofit Institute for Justice, who is representing the man. Meanwhile, the borough council president said the law was passed back in 1991 to prevent a couple of borough residents from selling cars in the street in front of their homes. One resident would buy beat-up cars, fix them, and sell them, he said. They'd constantly have 2 or 3 vehicles out there at a time. So the guy is saying, look, there was a legitimate purpose for passing this law. We were trying to stop something that was happening at the time. Now, here's the thing. If somebody's buying and selling cars like that, they're probably breaking other laws. Many states say once you sell, 4 or 5 cars a year, you need to be a licensed dealer, and you cannot do that from in front of your house. Because most states also say what a licensed dealer can and cannot do. And they usually have to have a fixed place of business. So the council will be asked at its May 6th council meeting to authorize the hiring of outside counsel to defend the lawsuit. So the man filed his suit April 9th, and the attorney I just talked about, plus Jeffrey Rose, got permission Friday to represent the man in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, even though they are licensed to practice law in Virginia. And so I've mentioned before that I'm licensed only in the state of Michigan. And if I really needed to, if somebody called me up and said, Steve, we need you to fight a case in Pennsylvania, can you do that? There's a process whereby I can try, where I can asked to be admitted pro hoc vice, where they would let me come in to try one particular case, but I would need to have a local attorney who would sign on and say, yes, I'll work with him to make sure that he understands the nuances of our, but there's a way to do it. And so Institute for Justice does not have on their staff an attorney from each of the 50 states, but they've got a whole bunch of attorneys who are licensed all over the place. But if they wind up someplace where they don't have an attorney licensed in that jurisdiction, they can get them brought in this way. So the man's attorneys say that the borough law arbitrarily bans Kramer from posting the sign, which is the for sale sign. And they point out the government can't ban a car sign saying for sale any more than it can ban other messages such as fly, Eagles fly, or vote Smith. So the man fought the ticket in district court, but a judge upheld the ticket, according to the lawsuit. He declined to appeal the decision and paid the fine, but he still wants to sell his 2009 Buick LaCrosse. He's fighting for the right to put the for sale sign on the car when he returns from his trip overseas. He teaches English in other countries. He retired last year as a biology and geometry teacher for Union County, according to the lawsuit. Meanwhile, the borough's council law committee discussed the matter, but the council doesn't want the borough streets used for commercial purposes. The committee's attitude was there's nothing wrong with the statute. Well, we'll see what a federal court says about that. They point out that parking on the street is a privilege, not a right. Question I have for you is if there's homes that were legally built in your borough that do not have driveways, and people have been parking for years in the street in front of their house legally, I'm not sure how far that right versus privilege thing and privilege versus right thing goes. We are allowed to regulate the way the privilege is exercised, one council member said. For those who encourage the man to try selling the car online, he says that attempt failed with the truck, but the for sale sign worked. Before he was forced to remove the sign, someone saw the sign and eventually bought the truck, according to the news release. The 3-count lawsuit says the man's First Amendment right to free speech was violated, as was his right to equal protection under the law and his right to due process. Lawsuit seeks an injunction prohibiting Nazareth from enforcing the law and a declaration that the law is unconstitutional. Seeks unspecified fees, costs, and expenses. For Will, this case is about more than just his for sale sign. It's about vindicating the rights of others to engage in commercial speech, according to the Institute for Justice press release. Organization is a nonprofit public interest law firm that challenges abuse of government power and secures Americans' constitutional rights, according to their website. Case is assigned to U.S. District Judge Gallagher. So I've mentioned many times before, the Institute for Justice does great work. Check out their website. I'll put a link in the description below the video. This is not a paid ad or anything. I just like them. I've watched a lot of their work. I've met a lot of the people who work for the Institute, people who run it. I've gone to see them argue cases in the Michigan Supreme Court, and they do great work. I'm glad they picked this case up to take. And think about this simply as a mental exercise. You have a car parked in the street in front of your house, legally parked. You can put a sign in the window that says, "Vote for me, I'm running for council president." You can put a sign in the window that says, "Hey, does anybody remember watching Phil Donahue?" Just trying to throw in something random. You could have put a sign in the window that says, "I pulled into Nazareth, was feeling about half past dead." But you put the words "for sale" in the window. Wrong. That's illegal. And so they are outlawing not the putting of signs in cars, but the putting of signs in cars that say "for sale." Or I'm sure the statute says, or any words to the effect that it offers for sale. And anytime you have a law that says you can speak, but only in certain ways, and we are going to not allow this speech, but we will allow this speech. The second you get into outlawing types of speech, you're going to get the courts looking at it very carefully and go, you better have a really good reason. You know, and so we've talked before about, yelling fire in a crowded theater, right? Can you imagine? Oh, and by the way, you can't offer something for sale in a crowded theater. What? Assuming it's a public theater. So there's just a weird thing to this. And I understand on some level what the borough is trying to do. And it would annoy me if the guy across the street from me parked a car on the street with for sale signs in it, and as soon as that one sold, another one appeared with for sale signs in it. And as soon as but of course, like I said, if the guy's doing it, he's breaking other laws. Right? He's acting as a car dealer out of it. He's curb stoning, basically, is what they call that. Acting as a car dealer at a residence. And so there are already laws on the books about that. So this is a weird case, and I've never heard of such a thing. I can tell you that I remember when I was growing up in Birmingham, Michigan. There's a town right over to the east of us, northeast of us, called Troy. And at the corner of Coolidge and Maple Roads, there was a big shopping center that had an office center and a couple other buildings, but nothing was being conducted on the weekends in that one building. So that one parking lot was largely empty on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays. And so people would park their cars there on Friday night with for sale signs. And it turned into a de facto used car lot with for sale signs with, for sale with a phone number. And I remember going by there and actually getting out of my car and walking around amongst all the cars in that parking lot. It was the weirdest thing. But that was a parking lot. But if it was a private parking lot and I owned the parking lot and that was happening in my parking lot, I'd have a problem with it. But that's because it's my parking lot. I've got the right to do that. But the street in front of your house, I understand you don't own it, but if you're allowed to park there legally, and you can park there legally with a sign in your window that says anything, so long as it's not for sale. So we'll see what happens. But this is all going on in Pennsylvania, Nazareth, which of course is the same Nazareth from the song The Wait. Free speech or public nuisance. Nazareth resident fights for sale sign law in court. Questions or comments? Put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. A heart kind and an open mind are the best traveling companions.